So for my seed, I wanted to share a science fiction story. And the reason why I wanted to share Land of Confusion as the opening song is it really ties into this science fiction story, which is really an allegory for Taoism. The song says there's too many men, too many problems, and there's not much love to go around. And my thought was, wow, in the mind, that's the illusion. That's what we're led to believe, but there's nothing but love. When we get past, that there is anything other than love, we get stuck in our heads and we get away from what's coming from here, the infinite intelligence from our hearts. There's nothing but love. So that's kind of like the trick, that, we think that there's not much love to go around, but we are the essence of love. So whenever I speak or whenever I connect, I have to take a moment to breathe and say, okay, I want to drop out of my head and back into my heart, and what do I want to share, at this moment. So for my seed today, I wanted to share with you my favorite science fiction story called The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin. And what it is about a man, who dreams. And whenever he dreams, he changes reality. So he changes reality for everyone around him, but he's the only one who remembers the differences in reality. So in the beginning of the story, he's very depressed. He tries to overdose and tries to end his life because he feels like he's all alone. Well, he dreamed about an overpopulated world. So the world became overpopulated and, it kind of felt like it was claustrophobic. So after he attempted suicide, he was forced to see a therapist, and he tried to explain to the therapist, what his condition was, that he dreams and he changes reality, and nobody can remember it but him. So the therapist starts experimenting on him, and he learns that George is the main character, George Orr, which is, I don't think, such a subtle reference to George Orwell and some of the dystopian literature. But the therapist, comes to understand and believe George's power, and he starts to use him. And he doesn't even tell George that he believes him. He keeps him believing that he's crazy. That he's unbalanced. So there's all these different realities, that come of this doctor, this therapist trying to control reality. He wants to cut back on the population, so he uses hypnosis to suggest to George that he cut back on the population. Well, then there's a plague that wipes out half the population. Then he suggests to George later on, let's fix the problem of racism. Well, then the reality is that there is no people of color, everybody is a shade of gray. And what happens in that reality is George dreams out his love interest out of existence because she's a Black woman. Then there's this attempt at control by the doctor. Let's dream about world peace. Let's dream that we all come together and that everything is okay. Well, what happened then is that there was an alien invasion and humanity united against this alien invasion. So eventually what the theme of the story came to was, it wasn't about fixing things or fixing people or fixing the human condition. Eventually George learned, how to be okay, with himself, the relationship with himself, to bring about, a balance. And in one reality, the aliens were not invaders or enemies. They were our benevolent caretakers. And one of the suggestion that George received in order to make peace with some of the inner turmoil in the world was this translation. It's a slight mistranslation, but it's philosophically pretty on. This is a translation from the Chinese philosopher John Zhou, and the alien is telling this to George, to try to make sense of his reality or his experience. And the quote goes, "Those whom heaven helps we call sons of heaven. You cannot reason this by using reason. You cannot work this by working. And I'm always losing my place here, but let me go. Okay, yeah. To let understanding stop at that what cannot be understood is a high attainment. Those who cannot do it will be destroyed on the lathe of heaven. So what that means to me is that the more we try to control and the more we try to use our minds, letting the minds, guide the heart, the more we create these, these dilemmas, these dramas, and these challenges. So that is my seed for today. Is that quote by John Joe, and introducing you to the story of the lathe of heaven, which will work into our story about and our talk about politics today. So, thank you. Well, I guess I'll go right into it. So let me get my notes.
Oh, that's right. You took care of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So today the talk is, and you know what? I think it's meant to be. My notes are, here's my notes. Because when I tune into what's emerging, I mean, I have an agenda here, I have an outline here, but Annabelle and I were talking, even beforehand. It's kind of like I want to drop out of my mind and back into my heart about what wants to be communicated today, what spirit wants to express today. And what sparked this conversation was a beautiful dialogue I've been having with Ken Kaplan over online on Facebook. And we're talking about politics and the nature of duality, and what do we need, or what do we need to be able to have more intelligent, heart-centered communications with our leaders, with our politicians. And what comes up for me around that is I get sad around this time of year. Because when all the political ads are running and we're looking about what's wrong with this candidate and what's wrong with that candidate, I kind of feel like it's very childish. I honestly think it's very childish, because I don't believe any person is this one-dimensional caricature, who is beyond redemption, or is beyond, having, a heart-centered conversation. Which got me to thinking as well about the separation of church and state. What comes up for me around what church is and what talking about spirituality is really just tuning into our hearts and what's our truth, what has been the truth of our experience. When I think of state or governance, I think about, kind of like these mental games that we play with each other to try to convince, or to try to influence, or to try to get people to do what we want them to do, to try to fix them. And that's just not my reality. I don't believe anybody is such a one-dimensional caricature, that they can't get past their own trauma, their own control drama. So I kind of, I've been entertaining this idea, which fascinates me, and it would be neat to see the humanity of these candidates, where they were really vulnerable. And it was pretty funny. I had mentioned this on Ken's post as well. I would like to see the three-legged race rule be implemented on political candidates, which means, that the Republican candidate and the Democratic candidate would have to be attached to each other at the leg for 2 months leading up to the election. And I would love to see how that would affect the political campaigns. Would they come to an understanding? Would they come into a relationship, rather than this combative mental, game, that they're playing, not just with each other, but with us. Mm-hmm. So I want to share something that I found from A Course in Miracles. Now, I did a deep dive in Course in Miracles about 15, 20 years ago. A lot of it I haven't retained consciously. A lot of it is really unconscious. But as I watch the news and I'm watching the narratives that that the news is presenting, the anchors are presenting, I feel uncomfortable, because when the news is presented, I can see where the data or the facts that are presented, they can be accurate, and there might be some manipulation to it. But what I'm really paying attention to a lot when I watch the news is the very limited scope of context. Meaning there's this idea that my people, my tribe, the people who I relate to are good, and those people who think differently are bad. And that's what makes me feel uncomfortable about watching that. And the one passage from A Course in Miracles that has helped me kind of get comfortable with that feeling, that comfort of discomfort, is this one from The Dynamics of the Ego. And I'm going to read this very slowly, because I'm watching this man on a conservative news network who I find pretty arrogant. And I'm repeating this back to my head, back in my head. Every brother you meet becomes a witness for Christ or for the ego, depending on what you perceive in him. Now, as I read through this as well, too, please feel free to put in your own term for, source, God, love, infinite wisdom. Everyone convinces you of what you want to perceive, and of the reality of the kingdom you have chosen for your vigilance. Everything you perceive is a witness to a thought system that you want to be true. Every brother has the power to release you if you choose to be free. You cannot accept false witness of him unless you have evoked false witnesses against him. If he speaks not of Christ to you, you spoke not of Christ to him. You hear but your own voice. And if Christ speaks through you, you will hear him. So what realization I came to watching and really internalizing that arrogance was taking responsibility for my own judgments. Because whenever I'm influenced by an ideal, or I'm influenced by the brain, by the mind, it's about judgment. It really is about judgment. As I'm watching these candidates that I am feeling that they're expressing a little bit of arrogance, I get curious. I get curious as, what experiences has this person had? What experiences have caused them to be so angry, or to be so feeling such contempt for someone that is different than them? And that's the thing. I want to have those deeper conversations, because I've learned, as someone who invites people into conversation where it's not about arguing over ideology, it's about getting to the center of what do we value, and why do we value it, and what spaces do we feel that we're most comfortable, that we feel like that, we're in a relationship with people. It comes back to values. There's people in the business, in corporate life, in politics, where results drive values. And I think that's where, we kind of lose the relationship, and where there's this sense of corruption, this sense of disappointment. But when values drive results, when there are those deeper conversations, I feel like then we have an opportunity to, create the world worth fighting for, like in the land of confusion that they're singing about. So I went completely off my notes, to tell you the truth. So yeah, but again, that's just what's emerging, dropping out of my head and into my heart. So this idea of duality, being able to understand how do we go from someone is separate from me, or there's this separation, to really understanding that we're all, we're all in this together. We really are. And what comes up for me around that topic is that, and this is my opinion, this has been my experience, and again, if it resonates, please, let's talk about it. If not, leave it for someone else or for another time. But I think of us as one soul, but 8 billion different stories. And being able to really ask and be curious about somebody else's story is a potential pathway to realizing that, we're all in this together. It is all one soul. And what comes up for me around that topic is, the deeper I go with my spirituality, and the deeper that I go in having real conversations with people, is that there are two schools of thought with this. There's what's known as the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Now, the tree of knowledge, you hear the story of Adam and Eve, how Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is really about duality, right or wrong, good or bad, and that there is this need for hierarchy, that we're like children, that we're supposed to be treated like children in order to understand what somebody out there understands, more than us, that we start to think of ourselves as less than. And we were actually talking about this in the kitchen earlier today. Susan, Charles, and I, we were talking about how when we come back to that, nobody's above us or nobody's below us. That we're all, that we're all equal. We're all in this together. The tree of life is about that there is no need for an intermediary. There is no need for a savior. Anytime you want to call upon that inspiration, it's there. It is there for you, but it requires listening. It requires dropping out of your head and back into your heart. There is a Gnostic gospel from St. Thomas where, apparently Jesus said, "He who drinks from my mouth shall become as me, and I will become as them, and secrets will be revealed." See, what that tells me is that the Jesus of the Gnostic Gospels, which may have been edited out of, our current texts, the Jesus of the Gnostic Gospels didn't believe in hierarchy, didn't believe that, I'm above you or you're above me. It's a two-way street. It's a partnership. It's a relationship. And that really floored me, to really come to that understanding that when you open it up and not try to force an ideology or force an opinion on somebody, but ask what led them to believe so strongly what they believe, to ask what has their experiences been like, you get to enter into their story. The ear, the Chinese character for the ear, or for listening, is a combination of the ear and world, meaning by listening and by asking the deeper questions, you are using your ear to step into somebody else's world. And again, it comes back to that Taoist influence as well, too, that there is no either or. It's a yes and. And that's what's really driving me today, and inspiring me today, in that I'd like to get past the story that the media and that politics is asking us to believe in. And I want to go deeper. I really want to go deeper with that conversation, because I think that might be the way forward towards what I think we all truly want in our heart of hearts. Yeah, I'm going to breathe for a moment because there's a lot coming through here. I think I'm going to put my agenda aside. And I want to ask, what is emerging? You know, what is coming up for you? You know, what is coming up in your heart? Because I'm very comfortable speaking. I mean, I've been an actor for 30, 35 years. So being in front of people and talking at people is nothing new to me. But I really find more enrichment in having a dialogue and asking questions. So yeah, so I'm gonna just throw out the other half of my talk, which is about the past and about the history. And I want to ask, what is emerging, you know, for you here in person or for you out there on Zoom land?